So yeah, just quick, I'm Reed from CT Food Launchpad and Chibasso and Atticus, and really honored to be a part of the crew along with Food and Bev Connect and Yale CBay to be putting together this whole thing. And like many of us have been saying, that if you're here today, it's because you feel like there's some potential going on in the state and there's some energy. And I think everyone here is interested in playing a role in figuring out how we can better connect folks from across the whole ecosystem to support brands on their journeys and to, like Anthony said, kind of uplift the whole state of Connecticut. So what we're doing here right now for this panel discussion, what buyers wish more emerging brands knew. So we have some great folks, John Ferrero from Big Y, we have John Lawson from Whole Foods, and Jim Creeley from Bozzuto. So I think what I'm hoping we can do, guys, is if we go around with a brief introductions and kind of what your role entails and what has kind of been your organization's approach to working with emerging brands, and if there's any specific headaches that we want to air today. I think we're going to make sure it's all constructive and helpful for emerging brands to figure out, what's the stuff that if you can learn it early on really sets you up for success in your journey to save you more time. So we'll do some introductions, a little group chat, and then we can move to a question and answer with the audience for about 10 minutes, and then we'll shift over to the next panel.
All right. So I'm John Ferrero, the Senior Director of Fresh Foods for Big Y Foods. We're headquartered out of Springfield, Massachusetts. We have 72 locations throughout Massachusetts and Connecticut, so kind of a tight geographic area. Roughly half of our stores are in Connecticut, so happy to be here. Been with the company for 19 years this year myself. Prior to that, I worked for Highland Park Market, which also is a retailer that's local to Connecticut. And it's really nice to be in Connecticut today, speaking at one of these engagements. Typically, I'm in Massachusetts talking at an engagement, and the only thing that I can tie to the community is that my parents met in Massachusetts, but I've lived my whole life in Connecticut, so it's nice to actually be here and talking about food in CT.
Cool. Hi, John Lawson. I'm with Whole Foods Market, coming up on 20 years at Whole Foods. And my position is I'm the local forager. So I support brands that are based in and manufactured in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So today we're focused on Connecticut brands, which is very exciting because Connecticut is a huge opportunity for us. And basically the goal of my role is to really develop brands to grow in Whole Foods Market. We're approaching 600 stores, I think, and it's a lot of brands think that I had this question a few minutes ago. A lot of brands think that they have to, if they get into Whole Foods, they have to work with the whole chain, and that's not correct. We onboard brands for a handful of stores. We onboard brands for Connecticut stores. One quick note about our regions. I represent all of Connecticut, but we are split down the middle in terms of our regions. We have the Northeast region, which is based out of on the New York side, and that is up to New Haven. And then we have the North Atlantic region, which is east of New Haven, and that's the North Atlantic is based out of Boston. So we have I think a dozen stores in Connecticut, and we have at least 2 more that I know of that are slated to open in the next probably 2 years or so. So a lot of business opportunity just in the Connecticut stores. And then if you do well in the Connecticut stores, then you look at growth from there. So and I have a connection to Connecticut. My mom was born in Hartford, so I used to think she was born in Greenwich, but recently she corrected me.
Hi, I'm Jim Creeley with Bozzuto's. I've been with Bozzuto's 21 years. I'm the director of specialty foods. Bozzuto's is a wholesaler based in Cheshire, Connecticut, and we've been around 77 years? 79 years. Second generation. We supply supermarkets, all family owned and operated from Maine to Maryland. Big Y is one of our good customers.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. And if there's anything pressing you want to jump right into, but I mean, I'm curious, do you when you're speaking with emerging brands, whether it's in a formal sales meeting or at an event like this, some of the big categories, we have pricing, we have packaging, we have the overall concept. Any of those do you think are particularly undervalued by brands earlier on in their journey, or is it the whole batch and just kind of folks needing to learn how to pull each lever within each category?
I would talk about differentiation.
Yeah.
I think at Whole Foods, our categories are highly rationalized. We've been doing category review, at least for the 20 years that I've been there, and we have a new model of category review that we've rolled out over the last few years, and our local program follows the category review process where each category is actually yearly, is open, basically the books are opened, we dig into it, you take out the things that aren't performing like they used to, and you bring in the new things to replace them. So the challenge is when you get to a highly, highly rationalized category, how do you break into that category with your product? Because everything on the shelf has sort of been through that cycle over and over and over again and has gotten in and is performing there. So when you look at your product, how does the package specifically that's going to connect with the customer? Because we're dealing with supermarkets here, right? We're not really, hand selling is kind of a different thing, like in a specialty shop. But when you're in a supermarket, you're on a shelf and your product has to talk to the customer from the shelf. And that's anything from, USDA organic to regenerative to fair trade, upcycled. You name it. If you have differentiators, women-owned, minority-owned, these are amazing. These are amazing differentiators that you really need to sort of dig in and make sure that the product is clearly communicating that without feeling crowded. A lot of times a brand will put something on the shelf and it won't communicate. And one of the things that I have suppliers telling me is, this is what the product does. Here's what it does. Here's what it does. And I said, don't tell me. The product has to say that from the label to the customer in the aisle, because you're not going to be standing there unless you're doing a demo, which you should do a lot of those. But you're not going to be there to talk to every single customer that looks at that category. So how do you jump out and make that connection?
Just to couple onto that, I think that you have to have a plan of how to stay on the shelf, right? So what is your long-term plan, and how are you going to remain relevant to people and meet them where they are in their lives? So a good example of that might be, there's 1 million honey producers in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Well, which one of them has actually come out and saw the trend of hot honey and made their own hot honey? So you're evolving. So you're showing the folks that are sourcing these products that you want to move forward. You're not just status quo and that you're just going through the motions and happy that you got placement the first time. It's one thing to get on the shelf, but how are you going to stay on the shelf? And that leads back to demos. That leads back to connecting with the communities that you're servicing. Just like Whole Foods, we will do local for 1 or 2 stores if it's meaningful to the consumer. But you have to connect with those stores, and you need to be boots on the ground or have boots on the ground that are going to connect with the store directors and the department managers, and it takes a lot of effort as a local entity to stay on the shelf. We always laugh, but if there's another hot sauce, barbecue sauce, honey, maple syrup, those are the oversaturated categories that you just really want to think about if you are truly unique and different in those categories, or are you just one more local vendor that might not have the whole picture together.
Yeah, plus you got to have regular promotions that gets you off the shelf too. A shelf tag, will increase the sales of your product if there's a reduced price. And that's why we look for at least 4 promotions a year, once a quarter, so that to continue that product moving off the shelf.
And in terms of categories, John, what you said about the honey, hot sauce, I hear that a lot from folks. And I think when a team is just starting their concept and trying to figure it out, often one of the big things is like, what category am I playing in? And so maybe we could share a little more detail of like, what do we think contributes to the oversaturation of that? It's because it's a lower barrier to entry for folks to kind of get something up and running. And then also, if somebody's thinking that, hey, I do want to do a pickle thing or a honey thing, like you said with the hot honey, how can they maybe use a kernel of that idea and actually bring it into a slightly different subcategory that is more growing or attractive to your team? Or can you just speak a little to that?
Yeah. So a trend is a trend, right? So if hot sauce is the trend du jour, someone's going to jump on board with that. So hot sauces, barbecue sauces have been in vogue for the last several years. So folks are migrating to that when they want to do a startup because they had someone in their family or themselves that had a unique recipe that they're trying to bring to market. But in order to stand out, you need to be a little bit different from that. And that's why I was excited to see some of the folks that are in the pitch contest later, because they're a little different and unique in what they're trying to accomplish out there. And that's what we want to see is evolution of the categories. We can continue to bring in as many hot sauces as we want, but where's the customer going? Not where the customer is today. And how can we get in front of that? And how can we have fun with that, right? So we're spending a lot of time on TikTok, right? I downloaded my own TikTok. I got off of social media and then got back on just for TikTok, which has become a total time suck of my life. But, we're having conversations. This is a good example yesterday. So one of our floral producers can make glittered roses for us, right? So it's a trend on TikTok right now. We're going to get into it and we're going to get out of it as soon as the trend starts to ebb off. But I guess the good news and bad news is Gen Zs are typically really trendy. Well, the bad news is they're trendy, and when it's over, it's gone. So it's kind of balancing that as a manufacturer and understanding, like, how can I keep the longevity of my company and my category strong by infusing it with some of these flavor profiles. I'll use Ithaca hummus is a good example of that, not local, but they've done a nice job of having dill pickle hummus and other flavors that are trendy and moving the industry forward.
And everything bagel hummus too, which is delicious. Using your hot honey example too, you talk about like what type of pepper are you using in that hot honey? Talk about the habanero or the jalapeno or the whatever that variety of pepper that you're using is. Look into that, lean into that, and then call that out, because you want to sort of take apart the components. Everyone is very, I think the market. I mean, you've got fads and you've got trends, right? Like you're talking about a fad. And so a fad, comes and then the life cycle's over. A trend evolves. So you look at like paleo into keto into whatever comes next. And if you can catch that wave on the way up, that's awesome. One of the long trends is I think people want, cleaner food with more identifiable ingredients. And so, when you can take apart the components of your product and really call out what each of those components is, and each of those components has a story, and make them, I mean, this is really a marketing branding thing, but making them so they're recognizable and approachable to the customer. I think that can go a long way. You put a hot honey on the shelf, but then how do you separate your hot honey from the other hot honeys that are on the shelf? So I think obviously promotions are a great way to go. In our stores, it's the yellow tags. Quarterly promotions is dead on. Like that's the standard. It's also getting in there and doing the demos. Like you want to connect with your customers. You want to listen to your customers, because when you're in there with your product and customers are coming to you and saying, oh, what if you did it this way? Or what if you did it that way? Keeping track of those conversations. I mean, that's basically free marketing advice. And, like aggregating that and then making those tweaks. A lot of times brands push back. They'll say, no, I'm doing it this way because this is the way I've always done it. The market is telling you to do it that way. Like sometimes you have to evolve to survive and grow, right? And so listen to what the customers are telling you and be flexible with the nature of the growth of your product and your brand.
And again, your labeling is important to call out all those attributes, and so the consumer, when she sees it, or he sees it, we'll give the product a try.
I think that's an interesting point too on labeling. So kind of two different grocers in the same space doing two different things. we find to have somewhat of a conventional customer. They lean towards more of a natural, organic customer, and we both have local in common. So when you're talking about labeling on your packaging, one thing that I find interesting when we're trying to look at new items is how you present it, right? So how does that small little badge on the packaging present to the customer, and what does it mean to the customer? We were looking at a local mushroom grower out of South Deerfield, Mass, just the other day, and they did a really nice job of labeling it for organic. But they did it in a way that it's on the package for those consumers that are looking for it, but it's subtle on the package for the consumers that might be afraid of organic. They're, as silly as it sounds, there are
a breadcrumbs approach.
Yeah, exactly. As silly as it sounds, organic is scary to some customers in the conventional channels. So you have to find that balance where it could honestly be a crossover.
Yeah, I think that's a fair price point too. So, and pricing is a super important part. Like knowing your pricing, like going in. One of the things that I encounter with new suppliers is a lot of times I say, "What's your SRP?" and I get a blank look, or I don't know. And I mean, it's like you got to know what is the price that you want to be on the shelf in the market, right? Like that's a really important question to be able to answer. And also to John's point, like knowing which market you want to go into, right? Like the shotgun approach, sometimes brands will be like, oh, I've just reached out to all these different markets and, just see what sticks, right? Like you want to be a little more thoughtful about the path for your brand. Like which customer are you trying to connect with? Are you trying to connect with a value customer? Are you trying to connect with a premium customer? Are you trying to connect with a natural organic customer? Like who is your target audience? And really focus, you want to focus your brand in that direction. I've had brands tell me, I'm not working with Whole Foods yet because I want to be DTC and really develop the brand through DTC. And I have a lot of respect for that. It's, I have a lot of respect when someone says, I'm focused on doing it this way because I'm really developing it, and then can I come back to you when I'm ready? And because then when they come back, they're going to come back with more experience, more data. They're going to have a customer base built up. So, I think that's another area to think about.
And in terms of the pricing that you mentioned, John, I mean, obviously, the whole world changes for these brands when they're in the farmer's market, just kind of selling it direct to some folks that are there, compared to when they expand into a regional or national grocery chain. And I think it's sometimes hard to think ahead for what are my costs going to be 3 years from now that I need to be reflecting in my price. I mean, I'm just curious, do you guys have any stories to share of brands that have approached it very well or that haven't approached it well? And I mean, nobody likes hearing that, hey, we got to raise our prices. So what might brands keep in mind earlier on in their journey so that they can kind of reduce any friction from that later on?
I mean, an easy one for me is distribution. I think a lot of brands are like, oh, I'm just going to deliver it to the store, and I'm going to bring it to the store, and it's not going to cost anything on the distribution side, and they're pricing it based on a delivered cost to the retailer. I think when you're thinking about your pricing, you want to make sure you're factoring in, and you want to fatten it up a bit, but you want to factor in that cost to the distributor, because if you're going to grow, you're going to need a distributor. And so if you're not factoring in that cost for the distributor, you're building an obstacle, at some point down the line that you're going to stumble over, because you're going to have to raise your retail is going to go up because the distribution cost is going to have to be incorporated into that.
Yeah, the biggest thing I run into is where they don't factor in the cost of them delivering 5 cases to the store versus me getting 1 or 2 pallets, and they, it has to be a delivered price. We look for a cash discount, of a couple percent, and all that has in 4 promotions a year, that all needs to be factored into your net cost to us as a wholesaler, and that's probably the biggest thing that they, like you said, they just like stare at you, I mean, they want to know, well, if I retail it for $7.99, what margin do you work off of? And I said, well, no, I need you to start from the bottom up, and not go off retail down,
I think it's important to remember that we're both for-profit businesses in most circumstances. There's a few unique situations that might be a little bit different from that. So when remembering that, we see local as sustainable, right? So less time on trucks, less fuel, less carbon footprint, and supporting the communities that we do business in. So there's a lot of benefits to doing local business together. But you need to talk to the buyers or sourcing agents, whomever they may be, and really understand each company's tactics around local. I would believe that most of the larger retailers have a strategy around local and how to get there, right? So for us, we're willing to lean in as much as you're willing to lean in, but it has to be mutually beneficial from a financial standpoint.
And in terms of John Ferrero and your mention of local, I mean, do your teams approach emerging brands any differently than they do with established brands? I mean, I know, slotting fees are some stuff that big brands that's just business as usual. But I mean, have you found any success in approaching the super emerging brands slightly differently, not to completely change the long-term game for them, but just to make sure they can build some momentum early on and get to the level that you're hoping they can be?
Reed and Charlie's, close your ears for this. So I'll use a really good example of something that happened somewhat local recently. So we partnered with Munson's Chocolate, Connecticut-based company. They came in. They have retail stores, so a little bit different of a business model. We tested some bulk chocolates with them. It didn't really pan out, but we did come to an agreement on trying some packaged chocolates, which has been very, very successful for us. The hard part was the initial conversations with them and not really understanding the retail business from a wholesale standpoint. So with a few accounts, Munson's in the past had delivered direct to store if there were 3 or 4 store units where it made sense to do so. So we asked them to come to our DC with the product, so we handle it, we distribute it for some of those more delicate items. Bozzuto's is our main partner in distribution and does a phenomenal job for us when it comes to the everyday, the core. When it comes to some of these smaller few cases that are coming in and out, we have our own DC that we utilize for some of those lower volume items. So not knowing the difference between delivering to one store and delivering to a DC, we had to have conversations about the cost of the product coming in, because now we're adding a layer of intensity of complication where we're handling the product, but it's more efficient as a business together and more financially efficient, I'll call that as well. So we're willing to coach through that, but we have to have an open and honest conversation with each other and understand where each other is at.
I mean, I think from our side, we don't have slotting fees. We have free fill, and I think it's hard. Like I have this theory that if you treat the emerging brand, you want to give the emerging brand a break where you can. So we try to find ways that we can make it more financially viable for them to get on shelf and grow the product. But when you start getting into things like cutting margins and things like that, I think you're actually you're putting them at a disadvantage for growth, because at some point they're going to have to perform at the rate that other brands are performing at. And if you're giving them that advantage early on, then if you're cutting the margin to hit a price point to support the brand, then at some point that price point has to be paid for. And if the brand doesn't have a plan for that, then you just end up in a situation where the retail is going to have to go up, and then you're going to end up hurting the brand down the line. So it's kind of a fine line. Like you have to, like from our perspective, you have to look at it as, are there ways we can help the brand that aren't necessarily going to create potential issues down the line? So because I'm always thinking about, like, any brand that I want to work with to bring in and grow is one that I want to think about, like making sure that I'm creating scenarios that are going to build success in the future.
Well, Bozzuto's for specialty, we have choices. We have a vendor agreement, that it's a maintenance fee billed twice a year of, $50 each, every 6 months, and in lieu of any slotting charges, And then we also have Bozzuto's virtual marketplace, which is an online platform, and I have information in the hallway here where you ship direct to the store. We invoice the store, we collect from them, and then you get paid. And there's no charge for that vendor to participate in that program. And of course, then we have the full-blown program. If they wanted to not do one or the other.
So I definitely recommend any emerging brands to swing by the Bozzuto's table and learn more about distribution opportunities like that. And then also just on that point of distributor, I think sometimes, when a brand's coming further on their journey, they totally understand the importance of the grocer because that's ultimately where the consumer buys it. But it's sometimes a little hard to understand how the distributor factors into that if you're so early on, and especially how can there be synergy between these three groups. So I mean, Jim, on your end or anybody else, how does that work? In what instances does that not really work, and how should brands be kind of factoring this triangular group of stakeholders?
I just got to really look at each one's program. I mean, if I set the item up, then they got to go to Big Y, and come to their terms, what they eat, or Whole Foods, what their terms are, and I know one of the brokers, when he interviews a new manufacturer, he tells them right up front, don't plan on making any money for the first year, because it's a very, all the different startup costs and upfront costs you have to pay, to get on the shelf.
I mean, I always encourage brands to try to build a partnership with your distributor. Depending on which distributor it is, they have different programs. They have merchandising. They can support you on submitting promotions. Some of the things that you might struggle with as a brand, they might have experience working with us on, and lean into that. It's from where I sit. I tell the brands, like, my only expectation is the stores are going to write a PO, and the distributors are going to fill that PO to the store. But then I tell them, there's also opportunities. Like, I know that this distributor will actually help you write your promotional calendar for the whole year, right? So the quarterly promotions, they can set that up. You can work out how much it's going to cost, and have that all planned out. Because I mean, our promotions at Whole Foods, we're like 3 or 4 months out to submit a promotion. So it's you really need to have that whole year planned out. You can't just sort of do it ad hoc. And a lot of the distributors we work with also have merchandisers. Merchandising is a hugely important part of having a brand, because when you've got your product on the shelf in the stores, whether you're in a dozen Connecticut stores or 60 Northeast Whole Foods, you can't possibly be in all the stores. And you might have one merchandiser who can float around the stores, but when you have merchandising teams in the stores, they can actually provide you pictures. They can give you a lot of feedback, but that's an extra expense. You have to build that into your cost. So, sometimes you might, as a local brand, you might be able to work with a distributor to get them to give you, at least comp you some of that, at least for some period of time, so you can figure out if that works for you or not. But you should definitely, distributors can be really, really helpful in a lot of different ways, and you should really sort of dig in and find out what are the services they provide and how can they support you.
I would say research and ask questions, right? So we're always here as a resource for you to ask questions. We welcome it because we feel that together we're going to build a stronger partnership in the long run, or actually avoid some bad moves potentially on your side. If there's, we can save you from financial woes on some of these early on conversations. So just ask questions, do the research on the front side.
Absolutely. And folks, at this point, we can shift into a brief Q&A. We have Gary over there with the mic, and Tegan has a mic.
Hello, I'm Matthew Browning from We Charcuterie Salami. We make a handmade, nitrate-free, shelf-stable salami. You've mentioned a couple times promos and demos. What's the best approach to be able to A, demo your product in a store, and B, what does a promotion look like from both sides, and how can we approach a retailer to be able to do some of those?
Yeah, I mean, demo is easy for us. I mean, we deal with a company called Damon Interactions, and so there's a portal. Whole Foods is a land of portals. If you sell in Whole Foods, we have many portals. It's like a little bit like Star Trek. So the demo portal is run by Damon Interactions. You can book everything on that. So once you're in the store, it's very easy to book demos. With promotions, there's actually a promotions portal on our supplier portal. If you go to wholefoodsmarket.supplier.com, that's our supplier portal. And even if you're a brand that's just interested in doing business with us, a potential supplier, you can still register for information on that portal. So promotions are through the supplier portal, and there's a form you fill out and you submit it, and you're basically picking out your time frame. You want to get into details of like what month. When you're planning promotions, when you're at that stage, you want to make sure you're thinking about what is the best time to promote my product? When am I going to get the most engagement? A big question that comes up between demos and promotions is also, do I demo when I'm promoting, or do I let the promotion be my demo? Because I'm double investing if I'm demoing when I'm promoting. But some brands feel like, hey, if I demo while I'm on promotion, I can actually drive more sales using that yellow tag. Other brands would rather take like a coupon in when they're not on promotion and then drive the sales. So kind of a philosophical question with no easy answer to it, but you just have to think about your category and talk to your peers as well. Talk to your peers about what they've done. Use the networking groups that are all around us to find out what's worked for other brands, and make sure you're getting the best information before you invest in these.
So we have a portal too, believe it or not. So usually they're fairly simple to get in and engage with them, but for us it's just promotional. It's not demo based in our portal, but that's how we would set up a new item. That's how we would drive promotions. And what's really nice about that is you get into each individual category manager's folders, right? So when they're planning out their ads, they're going to interact with you through that portal potentially and say, you know what, I think we could move it a week because it's going to hit the right week for charcuterie, or we're going to move it because it's a deli salad. It's going to hit the week of Labor Day or Memorial Day or whatever it may be. So it's a really good interaction tool. And if you go in and build out the entire year for that, you're able to have it in there already. So your pre-planning's done, so you're able to focus on other things. The other thing to think about is when you're building these relationships from the onset, ask the category manager what their cadence of communication with you should look like. A lot of times, you're so passionate about, and I'm not saying you, Matt, as a manufacturer, you're so passionate about your product that you want to call every week or every other week. There's X amount of other items that are on those category managers' desks. So it's really, really important to just ask the question on the front side. By the way, this is my recommendation for large manufacturing, for anyone. What should our cadence of communication be? And that's where you can plan out your demos with the sales manager at Big Y. That's how we do it. It's just a one-on-one, or at the store level with the store directors. So that communication piece and aligning on what your communication should be is really, really important. Some folks, younger generations want to do email back and forth. Some folks want a phone call. It's just going to vary. But ask that question on the front side.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Hi there. My name's Julia Gagre. I'm a student at the University of Connecticut. My question lies around what John F. You mentioned keeping track of customer conversations. So my question is, what are the recommended channels for collecting customer feedback? Does social media play a role in that? And how do you frame it to collect useful data?
That's a great question. So the easy answer is everywhere. So the social component is really important for us as a retailer. We also have customer care, through our website. We have customer care via phone, depending on how you want to connect. We have customer surveys that are done. So there's a lot of different facets that we use, but the important part is for my team is to be able to connect one-on-one. So with the customer and with the manufacturer both ways, we'll get a lot of different commentary internally on lines like Ciabasso. I see, Gary's here today from Lyman Orchard, so we'll get some internal information. But that works both ways. both of them will get information, and they do an awesome job about bringing that feedback back to us as well.
You know, there's also apps for that. I mean, I think if you look around, there's different apps that you can, if you have a team, even if you're a small team of, 2 or 3 people, or you and your partner, or whatever it is that's out there talking to people, there's apps where you can collect pictures, you can collect feedback, you can put all that in and sort of consolidate it into one place. So that's another thing, another area to look at. One thing I want to say on promotions also, when you're submitting promotions, put your SRP in there for your promotion. Work on different price points. Figure out what that optimal price point is so you can drive the most velocity when you're on promotion. That means you get the best bang for your buck.
Said on our portal, we have our merchandising calendar for the entire year that ties in all the ad themes, and so you can go through that and target, what's your best time to run a promotion.
Great. Well, we are running over time already, so we got to transition to the next one. But Jim, John, thank you all so much, and they're hanging around and hopefully are open to some chats with folks. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.